The envelope arrived at 7:14 in the morning, and Margaret Calloway almost missed it entirely. She was in the middle of a long line. Summer had just cracked open over Harborview like an egg, and the first wave of tourists always hit hard and fast, all sunscreen and credit cards and questions about where to get the best lobster rolls. Maggie's hands moved on autopilot. Scan, bag, smile. Next. She'd been doing this for 6 years at this particular register, and her hands knew the rhythm the way a pianist's hands know the keys, without asking permission from her brain. Outside the tall plate glass windows, the harbor was already gold. Lobster boats chugged out past the breakwater in the pale early light. And up on the bluff, catching the sun like it owned it, the Grand Harborview Resort gleamed white and impossible, all its flags snapping into salt wind. Maggie didn't look at it. She never did. "Mom, I think this one's ringing up wrong," said the man at her register, squinting at the screen. He was already sunburned, June 1st, and already sunburned. "That's the sale price," she said. "It updated this morning. You're actually getting it cheaper." He squinted harder, then shrugged. "All right, I trust you." Most people did, eventually. That was the thing about Maggie Calloway. She had one of those faces, 44 years old, fine lines around her eyes, dark hair going silver at the temples, pinned back neat under the store's green visor. A face that said, "I am not going to lie to you. Not because I'm especially virtuous, just because I don't have the energy for it anymore." Her break came at 9:15. She was pouring terrible coffee from the break room machine when Sandra from the express lane knocked on the open door. "There's a courier out front," Sandra said, looking genuinely puzzled. "Like an actual courier, suit and everything. He's asking for you, not your address. You specifically here at the store." Maggie set down her cup. "Did he say who sent him?" "He just kept saying it was personal correspondence." Sandra made a face. "Who sends personal correspondence by courier anymore?" "Someone who wants you to know they paid for it," Maggie said. She walked out front. The courier was young, professional, and visibly uncomfortable, standing on the rubber welcome mat between a display of beach toys and a stack of paper towels on sale. He held a thick cream envelope like it was something fragile. "Margaret Calloway, that's me. Sign here, please." She signed. He left immediately, the way couriers do when they sense they're delivering something complicated. The envelope was heavy, good papery, the kind you only get from certain stationers in New York. She knew that weight. She had once ordered that exact stock herself for a different life. She went back to the break room, sat down, opened it. Inside, a formal invitation engraved, cream on cream. "Dr. Daniel Harrington and Miss Vivian Cross request the pleasure of your company at their wedding celebration, Grand Harborview Resort, at June the 14th. Dress code, black tie." She read the venue twice. Grand Harborview Resort. Here, right here, up on the bluff, 3 miles from where she was sitting. Clipped to the invitation with a single gold paperclip was a note card, small, square. The handwriting on it was one she had not seen in 12 years, but her body recognized it, the way bodies remember things the mind tries to let go. "Margaret, come if you dare. No one will recognize you." QRD. She sat with it for a long time. The break room refrigerator hummed. Somewhere out on the floor, a child was crying about wanting a certain kind of cereal. Then Maggie set the note card down on the table, very gently, the way you set down something you're not afraid of but intend to deal with properly. She picked up her phone, scrolled to a contact she hadn't called in 8 months, let it ring twice. "Marcos," she said when he answered. Her voice was quiet, perfectly steady. "I need the car, and tell the others but we're going to a wedding." There was a pause on the other end. "When?" Marcus said. "June the 14th. Another pause. Then, "Should I be making calls?" "Yes," Maggie said, "but not yet. I want to do this quietly." She hung up, finished her coffee, rinsed the cup, put her visor back on, and walked back out to a register like nothing in the world had changed, except that her hands, for the first time in years, had gone completely still. The penthouse sat on the 34th floor of a building that didn't have a 33rd. Daniel had laughed at that when he first signed the papers. He didn't laugh at much anymore. It was 7 in the morning, the kind of gray Manhattan morning that looked expensive from up high and miserable from the street. Daniel stood at the floor-to-ceiling window with a cup of coffee he hadn't tasted, watching a garbage truck work its way along the avenue below, and thought about nothing in particular. That was what he told himself. Nothing in particular. Behind him, Vivienne was already awake. She was always already awake. She sat on the white sofa with her legs folded beneath her, a printed seating chart spread across the cushion, a red pen moving in short, decisive strokes. "The Hartwell table needs to move," she said without looking up. "I won't have Cecilia Hartwell seated anywhere near the windows. She photographs badly and she knows it, and she'll spend the entire reception angling herself toward the light." "Move her then," Daniel said. "I already did." "I am telling you so you know, in case she complains to you. She won't complain to me. She'll complain to someone." Vivienne drew a firm line through a name. "Everyone complains to someone at these things. The trick is making sure it doesn't reach the photographer." Daniel turned from the window. Vivienne Cross was 43 years old, blonde in the way that required quarterly maintenance, and beautiful in a fashion that felt architectural, as though her face had been designed rather than born. She was looking at the seating chart with the focused attention of a person solving a problem that genuinely mattered. He'd met her at a benefit for the cardiac unit at Memorial. She'd donated $120,000 and asked him 3 intelligent questions about post-operative care. He'd been impressed. He still was, in the way you could be impressed by something without being particularly warmed by it. "The magazine piece comes out the week before the wedding," she said, "which is perfect timing." "I know." Marcus mentioned it. "Surgical excellence." She said the name like she was tasting it. "Good placement. Clean photography." "I told them to use the one from the Lennox Gala. The black jacket." She paused. "You looked like yourself in that one." Daniel sat down in the chair across from her. He picked up the copy already on the coffee table, an advance proof, still smelling of ink. His own face looked back at him, steady gaze, a posture that said, "I have saved lives today and will save more tomorrow." The headline read, "The Quiet Genius of Daniel Harrington, Rebuilding Hearts One Patient at a Time." He put it back down. "The Harborview reservation is confirmed," Vivienne said. "The Grand Ballroom, the East Terrace, all 12 suites on the top floor. I spoke to their events coordinator yesterday, a woman named Patricia something, very efficient." "Good. You've been to Harborview before." It wasn't quite a question. He'd mentioned it once, months ago, and Vivienne had filed it the way she filed everything, quietly, for later use. "Years ago?" he said. "For a conference." "The resort is remarkable. The photographs from the terrace are going to be extraordinary." She made another small note. "I want the ceremony facing the water." Daniel nodded. He was rubbing the inside of his left wrist without noticing, his thumb moving in a slow circle over a small raised mark, crescent-shaped just below the base of his palm. A birthmark he'd had his whole life. He rubbed it when he was thinking. He rubbed it when he wasn't. "The legal matter," Vivienne said, not looking up. "Your attorney sorted it." "He's sending the paperwork." "And she'll sign?" Daniel was quiet for a moment. "She'll sign." Vivienne finally looked up. Her expression was not unkind. It was simply precise. "You told me she walked out when you were in the hospital." "That's right." "After the accident?" "Yes." She held his gaze for 1 beat. Then 2. Then she looked back down at the chart. "People like that," she said, "they don't change. They just find new ways to disappear." Daniel said nothing. He looked back out the window. The garbage truck was gone. The avenue was filling now. Cabs, delivery bikes, a woman walking a small dog with a raincoat on. Somewhere up the coast, about 4 hours north, the town of Harborview was waking up. He knew that, in a distant, abstract way. He knew she was probably there. He told himself he didn't think about her. His thumb moved again over the crescent mark. And downstairs, in the building's mailroom, a courier was already signing for a registered envelope addressed in his attorney's handwriting, with a second, smaller envelope tucked inside. That one had no returned address, just a name, written in Daniel's own hand, late on a Tuesday night with a glass of bourbon, half finished beside him. He still didn't know exactly why he'd written the note. He told himself it didn't matter. He was almost certain she wouldn't come. The envelope arrived on a Wednesday. Maggie found it on her kitchen table, where Marcus had left it the evening before, propped against the fruit bowl. like something ordinary. It wasn't ordinary. She recognized the law firm's logo on the outer envelope. She recognized the handwriting on the inner one. She made coffee first. Strong, black, no rush. Then she sat down and read it. She read it twice. Then she put it face down on the table and went to work her morning shift. Her house sat on the north bluff, above the harbor, where the lobster boats went out before dawn. From the street, it looked quiet. A grey Victorian with white trim, a deep porch, window boxes that she'd planted with lavender in May. Neighbors walked past it every day without giving it much thought. That was exactly how she wanted it. Inside was different. The front rooms were full of light, tall windows, bare floors of pale pine, walls lined with books she'd actually read, economics, architecture, coastal history, 3 shelves dedicated to hospitality law. A drafting table in the corner was covered with property surveys and annotated margin notes. On the mantelpiece, a single framed photograph. Her and her father, taken 14 months before his death, standing outside the Callaway Group's original hotel in Portland. Robert Callaway had not been a warm man, but in that photograph he was smiling. Maggie was smiling too. Marcus Webb arrived at 7 that evening. He let himself in with the key she'd given him 2 years ago and found her in the kitchen, the envelope still face down on the table between them. He was 64, silver-haired, deliberate in everything he did. He'd spent 30 years managing Robert Callaway's affairs and the last 14 months managing Maggie's. He set his briefcase down, looked at the envelope, looked at her. "You read it," he said. "I did." "And?" "Sit down, Marcus." He sat. She poured him coffee without asking. He took it without commenting. "He wrote me a note," she said.
"Handwritten, inside the legal paperwork?" "I know. He said, 'Come if you dare. No one will recognize you.'" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "What do you want to do?" Maggie turned toward the window. The harbor lights were coming on below, little gold reflections moving on the water. "He's getting married at our resort," she said, "at the Grand Harbor View, our property, the one Dad bought in 2009 for less than it cost to build because
Everyone else had walked away. Yes. He booked the East Ballroom. 200 guests. The flowers alone cost more than most people earn in 3 months. She paused. He has no idea. Marcus turned his coffee cup slowly in his hands. No idea that the resort belongs to the Callaway Group. No idea that you are the Callaway Group, effectively. No idea that the woman he just invited to come watch his wedding, or in his words, works in a supermarket 3 mornings a week and signs board resolutions by video call the other afternoons. No, Maggie said simply. And you'd like to keep it that way? She almost smiled. For now. Marcus opened his briefcase and laid out the guest list. She didn't touch it. She didn't need to. She already knew what it would look like. Manhattan's surgical elite, society names, people who had looked through her 20 years ago at dinner parties because she'd come from the wrong family, worn the wrong dress, said the wrong things. 200 people, Marcus said, all expecting a celebration. They'll get one, Maggie said, just not the one they planned. He studied her. What do you want from this? Nothing dramatic. She sat back down across from him. Just the truth. He raised one eyebrow. And the bodyguards? This time she did smile. It was a small, precise thing. Vivian will make that necessary, Maggie said. She always does with women she considers beneath her. Marcus closed the briefcase. He looked at her the way her father used to look at her in the last year of his life, with something that was almost, not quite, pride, as if he was still getting used to it. "I'll make the arrangements," he said. "Thank you, Marcus." He stood, buttoned his jacket. At the door he paused. "Maggie. He doesn't know what you remember about that night." She didn't answer right away. "No," she finally said. "He doesn't." Marcus nodded once and left. She sat alone in the kitchen for a long time after that. The harbor lights moved on the water below. Somewhere out in the dark, the Grand Harbor View Resort was already being dressed in white flowers and imported silk ribbon for a wedding that was 6 days away. She pressed her thumb, gently, automatically, against the inside of her own wrist. Not a crescent there. Just the memory of one. The harbor was quiet that morning. Maggie stood at the end of the dock with her coffee going cold in her hands, watching the resort up on the hill. Even from down here, she could see the white vans. 6 of them, parked in a line along the service road. Florists, caterers, a truck with a Boston company name printed on the side in silver letters. She watched a man in a black uniform carry an armful of white roses through the resort's side entrance, and she thought, he has good taste in flowers at least. He always did. She took a sip of cold coffee and turned back to the water. The town was already talking. She'd heard it at the register 3 days in a row. Did you see the rehearsal dinner menu? Lobster flown in from Portland. 400 guests, they're saying. No, 200, but the flowers alone cost more than my car. Debbie had leaned over the conveyor belt on Tuesday and said it directly. Maggie, honey, that surgeon's wedding is going to put Harbor View on the map. You must be thrilled. Thrilled, Maggie had said. That's one word. Debbie laughed and didn't notice that Maggie didn't. Now she stood on the dock in the early gray light and let herself do the thing she almost never allowed. She let herself go back to June 9th. Not to the whole year, just to that one night. They had fought in the kitchen. Daniel had his coat on, keys already in his hand, and she had said something. She couldn't even remember what, exactly. Something true, probably. The ones that land hardest always are. He had looked at her the way he sometimes did, like she was a translation error, and walked out into the rain. She had stood in the kitchen for 20 minutes shaking. Then she got in her car. She was going to Patrice's house. That was all. She just needed to sit somewhere she felt like herself. She found his car on the cliff curve. The guardrail was crumpled like paper. The engine was still ticking. She thought at first it was empty. She couldn't imagine a person surviving that angle. And then she saw the shape of him slumped against the window. She had 1 year of nursing school. She had quit to follow him to New York, and she had never once regretted it until that moment on the gravel in the rain, screaming his name, when she realized exactly how much she didn't know. She knew enough. She got his airway open. She found a pulse, faint and wrong, and then she lost it. She started compressions, and she counted out loud because silence would have killed her. The rain soaked through her jacket in the first 2 minutes. The gravel cut her knees. She kept counting. 11 minutes. 11 minutes of compressions on a dark coastal road with no one else in the world. When the ambulance finally came, the paramedic had to say her name 3 times before she stopped. Ma'am. Ma'am, we have him. You can stop. She rode with him to the hospital. She sat in a plastic chair in the waiting room for 4 hours, and she prayed to a God she wasn't sure she believed in, and she made every bargain she could think of. Let him live. Whatever that costs me, let him live. Then Eleanor Harrington arrived, Daniel's mother, dressed perfectly, even at midnight. She had always looked at Maggie the way you look at something you plan to return to the store. She sat down beside Maggie and folded her hands in her lap and said very quietly, "He's stable. The family is here now." "I know," Maggie said. "I'll go see him in." "I think," Eleanor said, "that you might want to consider what's best for Daniel. In the long term." Maggie looked at her. "He has a career ahead of him that requires everything," Eleanor continued. "Everything. You're a sweet girl, but I wonder if you've ever asked yourself whether you help him or—" She paused. "Complicate him." Maggie stood up. She didn't have an answer that wouldn't have made things worse, so she walked out. She drove to Harborview because the sea was the only honest thing she could think of. She never went back. And Daniel, when he woke, was told she had left before he was conscious. Just walked out. His mother's voice, soft and certain, filling in the shape of something he was too wounded to question. The story set like concrete. Maggie finished her coffee. The dock creaked under her feet. Up on the hill, another white van pulled through the resort gates. She pressed her thumb against the inside of her own wrist, gently, automatically. She knew exactly where the crescent was on his. She had pressed that spot for 11 minutes in the rain. She knew that mark the way you know something you made matter. Her phone buzzed. She looked down at the screen. The message was from a number she didn't recognize, but the first 3 words stopped her cold. It said, "He knows you're here." Vivienne Cross arrived on a Tuesday, which was the wrong day for the florist and the right day for no one else. She came in a black car that was too long for the resort's roundabout, and she made the driver go around twice while she finished a phone call. The bellman watched from the entrance. They had a system for rating arrivals. Vivienne scored a 9, before she even got out of the car. "This is not what I approved," she said to the event coordinator, Elena, within 4 minutes of walking through the lobby. She was pointing at the floral arrangement on the welcome table. "I approved ivory. This is cream. These are different colors, Elena." "I understand, Ms. Cross. I'll have it replaced immediately." "You'll have it replaced in the next 30 minutes, or I'll have the florist replaced. Which would you prefer?" Elena chose the flowers. Vivienne moved through the resort like an inspection. She upgraded the bridal suite lighting. She had the poolside chairs rotated 6 degrees to improve the afternoon photograph angle. She found a water stain on a ceiling panel in the east corridor, a water stain no guest would ever notice or look for, and she had it documented in a formal complaint before noon. The staff started using hand signals when they saw her coming. 2 fingers meant she was in a good mood. 1 finger meant she was not. By Wednesday afternoon, no one was using 2 fingers. Daniel followed her through most of it. He trailed half a step behind, which was not where a groom should walk, but was where he had learned to walk. He agreed with her corrections. He apologized on behalf of the hotel when she found something wrong, even though it was not his hotel and he had nothing to apologize for. "You don't have to do that," said his best man, Carter, quietly on the second evening. "Do what?" "Apologize for things that aren't yours." Daniel looked at him. "She just likes things right." Carter didn't say anything else. He had known Daniel for 22 years and he understood when a door was closed. It was on that same evening, over dinner on the private terrace, that Vivienne mentioned the cashier. She said it the way you drop something fragile, carefully, watching to see where it lands. "I looked her up," Vivienne said, cutting her fish into precise thirds. "Your little cashier ex-wife, Margaret Calloway. Did you know she still lives here?" "In this town. Scanning groceries, apparently, at a market on Coastal Route 1. She smiled. "Can you imagine?" Daniel's jaw moved. It was a small thing, a tightening. Not contempt, exactly. Something older than contempt. Something that looked more like a bruise being pressed. "You looked her up," he said. "I was curious. I like to know what I'm walking into." She lifted her wine glass. "She'll probably show up, you know. Curiosity alone would bring her. Some women can't help it. She won't come. But if she does..." Vivienne set the glass down. "I've already spoken to Elena about seating. Back row, near the service corridor, and I'll make sure the right people know who she is." Daniel's first attempt. "I think that's the kindest framing, don't you?" Daniel said. "Sure." He said it to the table. He did not look at his wrist, but his left hand moved under the table, and his right thumb found the inside of it without him deciding to do that. He held it there for 3 seconds, then he picked up his fork. Vivienne was already talking about the centerpieces. Down on the main floor, inside the event office behind the grand staircase, a junior staff member named Theo knocked on the open door. Elena looked up from her seating chart. "Sorry," Theo said. "This just came through the owner's channel, the private one." He held out a printed message. "I didn't know what to do with it, so I brought it here." Elena took the paper. She read it twice. She read it a third time, which was not something she usually needed to do. The message was simple. A majority shareholder of the Harborview Resort Group would be attending the Harrington wedding as a personal guest and was to be extended full shareholder courtesy for the duration of the event. Elena put the paper down on her desk. She had worked at this property for 9 years. She knew what shareholder courtesy meant at a Calloway property. It was not a hotel policy. It was not a guideline. It was a blank check written in the founding documents, and it had only ever been used once before, years ago, by Robert Calloway himself. Whatever that person wants, they get. She looked at Theo. "Do we know," she said carefully, "who this shareholder is?" Theo shook his head. "The message just says she prefers not to announce herself in advance." Elena sat very still. "She." Elena picked up the phone. She didn't call the front desk. She didn't call security. She called the head of housekeeping, the head of catering, and the resort's senior events coordinator, in that order, and she said the same 3 words to all of them. "Shareholder courtesy, active." Then she hung up and looked at Theo again. "Tell the Valley team," she said, "that the owner's reserved space near the north entrance is to remain clear this morning. No exceptions." Theo nodded and left without asking a single question. He had worked here long enough to know when a question was not the right tool. At 9:45 in the morning, Daniel Harrington stood in front of the mirror in the presidential suite and adjusted his tie for the fourth time. The tie was perfect. It had been perfect on the second adjustment. He knew that. He kept adjusting it anyway. His best man, a cardiologist named Greg, was sitting on the corner of the bed watching him. "You good?" Greg asked. "I'm excellent," Daniel said. "You fixed that tie about 6 times. 3 times. Daniel, I'm excellent, Greg." Greg said nothing more. He had known Daniel for 11 years, which was long enough to understand that when Daniel said he was excellent, the conversation was finished. Daniel looked at himself in the mirror. The shirt was charcoal gray, the boutonniere was white. He looked exactly like a man who had built a perfect life and was about to seal it with a ceremony in front of 200 people who admired him. He thought briefly about the envelope he had sent, the invitation, the handwritten note at the bottom. "Come if you dare, no one will recognize you." He had written it at 2 in the morning, a little drunk on good scotch and old bitterness. In the daylight, it felt slightly less satisfying than it had at the time, but only slightly. She wouldn't come. She never came to anything. She had spent 12 years being invisible, and that was her choice, and it was the right one, and today was going to be a beautiful day. He straightened his tie one final time and turned away from the mirror. On the north bluff, Maggie set down her coffee cup and looked out at the water for exactly 1 minute. Then she picked up her bag and walked to the car. Marcus was already outside, standing beside a dark sedan, his suit jacket buttoned. 2 other men stood near the gate, quiet, unhurried, the kind of men who look like they belong to the building rather than to any particular person. "You don't have to bring them," Maggie said. "I know," Marcus said. "They're coming anyway." She looked at him. "You own the venue," he said simply. "Someone should know that, besides you." She didn't argue. She got into the car and drove herself, with the sedan following at a distance that was close enough to matter and far enough not to crowd her. She parked in the space near the north entrance. The valet stepped forward, saw the plate, and stepped back without a word. Inside, the wedding was already a world unto itself. 200 guests, white chairs dressed in ribbon, champagne moving through the room on silver trays, flowers everywhere, tall, extravagant arrangements that smelled expensive and beautiful and slightly overwhelming. Maggie walked through the entrance and a staff member near the door caught her eye and gave a small, professional nod, then another, then a third. She moved through the room quietly. She did not rush, she did not look around as though she was searching for something. She simply walked to a seat near the front, not the back, not a corner, not a shadow, and sat down. A woman nearby glanced at her blue dress and then away again. Not memorable, not remarkable. Just a woman who knew where she was going. Across the room, a young assistant in a cream blazer was running her finger down the seating chart for the second time, then a third. Then she looked up, scanned the room, and looked back down at the chart. She leaned toward a colleague. "Who is that woman in the front row? Blue dress." The colleague looked. "I don't know. Is she on the list? I can't find her." They looked at each other. The assistant straightened her blazer, tucked the chart under her arm, and walked quickly toward the back hall where Vivienne Cross was having her veil adjusted. 40 seconds later, Vivienne appeared in the doorway. Her smile arrived before she did, wide, bright, and sharp as something you don't notice until it's already caught you. She moved through the crowd with the ease of a woman who had spent her entire life knowing that rooms reorganized themselves around her. 200 heads turned the way they always did when something beautiful and dangerous begins to cross a room. Maggie did not move. She stood where she was, hands loose at her sides, her dark green dress catching the light from the chandeliers above. She did not smooth her hair. She did not check her posture. She simply waited. Vivienne stopped 2 feet away from her. "Oh, Margaret." Her voice was warm, pitched just loud enough to carry. "Daniel mentioned you might come. How brave of you." A small pause, perfectly timed. "Are you still at the... what was it? The supermarket?" The guests nearest them went very still. Maggie smiled. It was a real smile, not a performance. It's a lovely venue, she said. You chose well? Vivienne blinked. That was not the answer she had rehearsed a response to. She recovered in under a second. We've seated you near the east wall, she said, closer to the service corridor. I thought you'd be more comfortable there. Less noise? She tilted her head. Daniel's attorney mentioned you might need some guidance on appropriate attire. I do hope you found something suitable. I managed, Maggie said. I'm sure you did. Vivienne's smile sharpened. She turned just slightly toward the cluster of guests standing nearest to them. Her voice rose. Everyone, I want you to meet someone. This is Daniel's first wife, Margaret. She's a cashier at the local supermarket, a bright, generous laugh. Isn't it sweet that she came all this way? The room went quiet. Not the polite quiet of a room between songs. The held-breath quiet of a room that has just understood it is witnessing something that cannot be walked back. Then Marcus stepped forward. He moved without hurry. He was a compact man in a charcoal suit, and he carried a thin portfolio the way attorneys carry things, like it weighed nothing and everything at once. He stopped just beside Maggie's shoulder. Ms. Cross, he said. His voice was very calm. I believe you may be speaking to the majority shareholder of the property you're currently holding your wedding on. He held out the portfolio. He did not insist she take it. He simply held it there, open, in the space between them. Vivienne's smile did not disappear. It did something worse. It stayed exactly where it was, while the rest of her face changed around it. A smile left behind after the warmth underneath it had simply stopped. Several guests leaned forward. One man near the bar set down his glass without looking at it. I'm sorry, Vivienne said very quietly. What did you just say? Marcus did not repeat himself. He didn't need to. Maggie looked at Vivienne without anger, without satisfaction. She looked at her the way you look at something you already understand completely. Thank you for the seating near the service corridor, Maggie said. I know that wing well. I approved the renovation drawings myself 2 years ago. The side door of the ballroom opened. It opened the way doors open when someone pushes through them, without looking first, quick, confident, already mid-thought. Daniel Harrington walked in from the side entrance, his bow tie slightly crooked, one hand raised to acknowledge someone across the room. He was laughing at something, and then he heard it, or maybe he felt it, the particular silence of a room that has stopped. He lowered his hand. He looked toward the center of the floor, toward Vivienne's rigid smile and Marcus Webb's open portfolio and the gathered guests who had all turned in the same direction. And then he saw her face. 12 years, he had told himself on more than one occasion that he would not recognize her. That time does that to people, that she would be diminished, softened, worn down to something he could step past without feeling it. He was wrong. His hand dropped to his side. His mouth opened and nothing came out. Maggie turned her head slowly and looked at him across the room. She did not smile. She did not look away. The guests did not move. They stood exactly as they were, drinks raised or lowered, smiles half-formed as if someone had pressed pause on the entire afternoon. Daniel walked toward her. Vivienne said, Daniel, sharp, a warning. He did not stop. Marcus Webb closed the portfolio, quietly, like a man who understood that the meeting had just changed its subject entirely. The guests parted without being asked, not because they were polite, because something in the way Daniel was walking told them to. He stopped 3 feet from Maggie. She was looking at him the same way she had looked at him from across the room, steady. No performance in it, just looking. He opened his mouth, and what came out was not what he planned. You look the same, he said, almost exactly the same. That's not true, she said, and neither do you. A beat of silence. Danielle, Vivienne's voice again higher now. She is making a scene. Tell her to leave. We have lawyers here. We have guests. This is our day, and she has no right to... Daniel raised one hand. He did not look away from Maggie. Vivienne stopped. He said quietly, How did you get that scar on your right palm? Maggie went very still. He had seen it when she turned toward him. A faint pale line crossing her right hand, thin as a thread. Old. The kind of scar that comes from gravel and pressure and time. He had noticed it without knowing why, and the not knowing had sat at the back of his mind like a sound he could not identify. Roll up your sleeve, Daniel, she said. He looked at her. "Your left sleeve," she said. "Roll it up." He did not know why he obeyed. He reached for the cuff of his left sleeve and folded it back once, twice, until the inside of his wrist was exposed to the light of the ballroom. The room was absolutely silent. There it was, a small crescent-shaped mark on the inside of his left wrist, slightly raised, a discoloration he had carried for 12 years without ever understanding its shape. Doctors had called it nothing. A minor pressure bruise, they said, from the seatbelt, from the road, from whatever impact had cracked his ribs and stopped his heart on a coastal highway on a November night. He stared at it. Then he looked up at Maggie's right hand. The scar, the shape of it, the placement of it. A thumb pressed hard into a pulse point. Pressed and held and pressed again. 11 minutes on a wet road in the dark. A woman kneeling over a man she was terrified of losing with nothing but her hands and whatever she had left inside her. "You were there," he said. It was not a question. Maggie did not answer right away. She looked at his wrist. Then she looked at his face. And something moved through her expression, something that had been held back for a very long time. "You were gone," she said. "For almost 2 minutes, you were gone. And I wouldn't let you." Daniel's hand began to shake. He did not close his sleeve. He stood in the center of the room in front of 200 people, in the light of a chandelier he did not own, and he shook. "What is happening?" said Vivian. Nobody answered her. "Come with me," Daniel said. His voice was low, steady, like he was trying to hold something together by sheer will. "Not away," he added quickly, and he looked at the guests, at the tables, at the soft winter light coming through the tall windows. "Here, just over here." Maggie followed him to the corner of the ballroom, near the window. 200 people watched them walk. He turned to face her. "Tell me," he said. "All of it." So she did. She told him about the dark road, the rain, the way his car had come to rest against the guardrail at an angle that shouldn't have been survivable. She told him about the 11 minutes before the ambulance arrived, about the cold asphalt under her knees, about counting, pressing, counting again. "You were gone for almost 2 minutes, she said. "In the middle of it, your pulse just stopped." Daniel said nothing. "And then it came back," Maggie said, "and I kept going until they pulled me away. The waiting room," he said. His voice had changed. "Yes, my mother was there. Yes." He closed his eyes for just a moment, then opened them. "What did she say to you?" Maggie was quiet for a few seconds. "She said that you had people, that you had family, that the kindest thing I could do, for you, was to let you heal without the complication of me." She paused. She said it gently, that was the thing. She was very gentle about it. Something crossed Daniel's face that she had never seen before. Not anger. Worse than anger. "She told me," he said slowly, "that you left before they knew if I would be stable, that you hadn't waited, that you had." He stopped. He pressed one hand to his jaw. "She said it showed your character." "I know," Maggie said. "I figured this eventually. That's what she must have said. She died 4 years ago. I know that too." The words landed in the silence between them like stones dropped into still water. Neither of them reached for them. There was no one to confront, no one to ask. No scene that could be made that would produce any kind of relief. Across the room, Vivian was speaking in a rapid, low voice to a man in a gray suit. Her attorney, most likely. She had her hand flat against her collarbone, the way she always stood when she was deciding something. A minute passed, maybe 2. Then Vivian walked back. Her posture was perfect. Her expression had been arranged into something that looked almost like calm. "Daniel," she said, "I'm not proceeding today." He looked at her. "You have unresolved issue," she said. "That much is clear. My family's attorney will be in touch regarding the arrangements." She picked up her small clutch from the nearest table. She looked at Maggie once, just once. Then she looked away, as if the looking had been a mistake she was correcting. "I wish you both whatever it is you're clearly still working out." She walked toward the doors. The room watched her go. Her heels made no sound on the carpet. That was somehow the worst part. The doors swung shut behind her. For a long moment, nobody moved, nobody spoke. Then the string quartet, apparently having decided that silence was more dangerous than music, lifted their bows. Something slow and soft began to fill the room. And 200 people sat very still, as though the music was the only thing holding the moment in place, and any one of them moving might cause the whole thing to shatter. Daniel was still looking at the doors. Then, very slowly, he turned back to Maggie. His mouth opened and closed, and he stood there with 12 years of the wrong story dissolving in his eyes, and whatever he was trying to say next, he could not find it yet. The string quartet played something without a name, something that sounded like it had been waiting in the walls of this room for a long time. Maggie didn't move toward Daniel. She didn't have to. He crossed the floor to her, slowly, like a man walking across ice, testing each step. "Maggie," he said. Just her name, nothing attached to it yet. "Daniel." Someone had opened the tall glass doors at the back of the ballroom. Salt air moved through the room. The wedding flowers swayed just slightly. "Is there somewhere we can talk?" he asked. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "The conservatory." The conservatory was at the end of the east wing, glass on 3 sides. The sea right there, gray and patient, the way it always was in Maine after dark. The wedding flowers had spilled in here too. White roses, white hydrangeas, all of it still cold and perfect and completely wrong for the moment. Daniel sat down on a low bench. He looked at his wrist, the crescent birthmark, small and dark and there since the day he was born. "Tell me what happened," he said. "That night, all of it." Maggie sat across from him. She folded her hands in her lap. "You were going too fast on the coast road. You always went too fast on that road. I was behind you. I saw the car go through the barrier. I remember headlights. That was me. I got to you before anyone else did." She paused. "You weren't breathing right. I did compressions. I counted. I always count out loud when I'm scared. And I pressed my thumb right there," she said, gesturing at the mark, "because that's where I could feel the pulse come back." Daniel stared at his wrist. "I rubbed that spot every single day," he said quietly. "Every morning before surgery. I didn't know why. I told myself it was a habit." "It wasn't a habit." "No." He looked up. "It wasn't." The sea moved outside the glass. Somewhere back in the ballroom, they could hear voices, low, uncertain, the sound of a party that didn't know if it was over. "I told myself you left," Daniel said. "I needed that story. I know. I was wrong." "Yes, you were." He didn't flinch from that. She was glad. She didn't need him to argue with it. "I built something here," she said. "It took a long time. My father helped near the end. We had maybe 8 months together before he died, but they were real months. I learned what I was worth." She looked around the conservatory. "I learned what this place was worth. And the market on 5th. He said it carefully. She almost smiled. "I like working. I like people. I like knowing what a bag of groceries costs." She looked at him. "It keeps me honest." Daniel was quiet for a while. "I'm getting married tomorrow," he said. Then he stopped. "I was getting married tomorrow. I know. I don't think I am anymore." "That's between you and Vivian." He nodded slowly. He looked like a man who had just understood something that had been obvious to everyone else for years. It wasn't a good feeling, and he didn't pretend it was. "Can I take you to dinner?" he asked. "Not tonight." "Not here. Sometime in this town." Maggie looked at him for a long moment. The sea was right there. The flowers were still cold. The quartet was still playing somewhere down the hall. "Yes," she said, "sometime." They walked out through the lobby together. Marcus was waiting near the doors. The staff had gathered, not crowded, just present, the way people stand when something has shifted and they feel it without being able to name it. One of the younger bellmen leaned toward the event coordinator. "Is that really her, the cashier from the market on 5th? The coordinator watched Maggie move through the lobby of her own resort. Unhurried. The sea light on her face. No apology in any part of her. "Yes," she said quietly. "And no." Maggie walked through the front doors into the night air of Harborview. The town was still there. The water was still there. 12 years of a life she had built with her own hands. Still there. She had not come here tonight to win. She had come to finally, at last, be seen, and she had been.